So you've launched your Performance Max campaigns, they're running well, they're getting conversions, and now the big question, how do you scale them without killing performance? That's what I'm going to cover in this video. It's going to be a quick walkthrough with a step-by-step guide and 5 advanced tips that go beyond just increasing the budget. So let's dive in. Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Timo and I've got clicks in mind. Today we're looking at scaling Performance Max campaigns, but first I think we have to look at what that actually means. Let's look at the details. So scaling means increasing your ad spend in a controlled way with the goal of driving conversions and revenue while keeping ROAS or CPA within an acceptable range. What that is, of course, you have to define for yourself. So that often means just increasing your daily budget or lowering your efficiency goals like target ROAS. So ideally what you want to see is something like this, where you can see the red curve, our costs are going up, and therefore our revenue, the green curve, also goes up in the same proportion. In this case, we even could increase our ROAS, but that's not normally the case. It's just because we're at a lower budget level. But here's the reality. Scaling almost always comes at the cost of efficiency. And that has something to do with the law of diminishing returns. Because Performance Max campaigns always try to get the best performance. So at first, it's easy to get the ready-to-buy high-intent audiences, which are very efficient to market to. But at some point, this ready-to-buy audience will be saturated and Google has to increase the reach to colder audiences. And they are not as ready to buy. So you can't expect to hit the same efficiency targets as with the high-intent ready-to-buy audience. And at some point, you will be hitting a wall where more budget doesn't mean more revenue, or even the opposite. So hitting a wall can look something like that. Costs go up, the conversion value goes up as well in this case, but you have to consider the actual ROAS and it decreases significantly. Let's look at it in the Google Ads interface. So what you can see here is not ideal, but is a good case to see how that actually works. The costs increased from like 4,000 to 13,000, so increased by the factor 3, and the conversion value just increased from 26,000 to 66,000, so just a little bit more than doubled. And therefore you can see the ROAS completely tanking from 700% to 400%. And in this case, to correct this, the ad spend was decreased again, and you can see that the conversion value also decreased by a bit, but not as much. And you can see how the ROAS is going up again, and the conversion value also stays at a higher level. So as you can see, increasing your budget usually leads to a lower ROAS or higher CPAs and the feeling that the performance suddenly drops. And of course, it all depends on the budget levels and extent, but usually that's completely normal and don't panic if the performance dips a little bit. You have to expect that. So scaling or increasing the budgets usually lead to lower ROAS, higher CPAs, and the feeling that the performance suddenly drops. And for you, you have to expect that because that's completely normal. Don't panic when performance dips. Of course, that all depends on the extent, because as long as you haven't reached all the people who are ready to buy, you can usually increase your budgets without really using your efficiency. So once you've hit that border, things will go south, but that's also how you scale and how to find new customers. And now let's look at the steps of scaling Performance Max campaigns. Let's first look at scaling by increasing your daily budget. You might see a status like this where it says limited by budget. For you, that's a good sign that more budget could bring in more revenue. Because Google is telling you here there are more searches which are relevant to your offers than you are currently able to be shown for. So if you see that, it's a good sign that you can increase your budget and get more results. And of course, don't take things for granted here from Google. It's just an estimation how things will go from all the data Google has. And a quick side note, in general, I wouldn't recommend having Performance Max campaigns limited by budget. Why? I would always try to control the ad spend through the efficiency targets of the target ROAS or target CPA. Because with that, you can be sure that on a good day, you can cover all the ready-to-buy people without having the constraints of budget. If you've just started the campaign, At first, it's important to wait until the learning phase is over. That usually takes between 2 and 6 weeks and always depends on your conversion volume. If you have just a few per week, of course, it takes longer for Google to learn. As a general rule, you're aiming for at least 20 conversions per month, but ideally it would be 50. Because at that level, the Google algorithm really works at a steady level. If your campaign is getting stable results and you're happy with the ROAS, you can scale and increase your daily budget by 15 to 20%. If you are working with smaller budgets like $20 or $30 per day, your increases can also be a little bit bigger. But here it's important, try to don't change your bid strategy so you target ROAS at the same time, because too many changes to the algorithm just start a whole new learning phase. So after you've increased the budget, for you it's time to observe. What you like to see is what I showed at the beginning. You want to see an increase in the conversion value in the same way you increase the cost. But you shouldn't expect that to be from day one. And once again, how much time you give the algorithm always depends on the budget level and the conversion volume. And once you see the results scaled in the same way, you can just go on and do the increase again. But be aware that your efficiency, for example, the ROAS, will drop eventually. And that brings me to the last point of know when to stop. As I've showed you, at some point scaling hits a wall. So there is a point where more budget doesn't get you more results. And you need to always be aware of that. So that was the walkthrough for increasing your daily budget. But if you are a little bit more advanced and if you're controlling your ad spend through your target ROAS, there's another option. Because a lower target ROAS gives Google more freedom to go into the colder audiences and increase the reach. So that leads to lower efficiency, so a lower ROAS, but if you're doing it right, it can lead to a higher total profit. But for that, you really have to know your numbers. So you have to know your margins and your break-even ROAS. So you must know what your lowest ROAS is where you're still making a profit. And with that, a lower ROAS can mean higher profits in the end. So let's look at a realistic example. It's all about finding your sweet spot here. So let's look at the 4 different scenarios. In this example, we have a 50% gross margin and therefore a break-even ROAS of 200%. And then you might go with a high ROAS. So you go in, set your ROAS at 500, spend $1,000, get 5,000 back in revenue and make 1,500 in net profit. Then you have the option where you're very growth focused and go with a very aggressive target ROAS just above your break-even ROAS with 250. You're spending 6,000, you're getting 15,000 in return and you're making also 1,500 net profit. But then there's the sweet spot in this case where you set your ROAS to 300, spend 4,000, get 12,000 in return and make the highest profit, which is 2,000. So here you can see higher ROAS doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the best for your business, but lowering your ROAS could lead to successful scaling here. Now let's take another, maybe more comprehensive look on scaling. I give you the 5 extra tips for smart scaling, not just of your Performance Max campaigns, but of your entire account. And they are: run supporting campaigns, segment your campaigns, check your website quality, use retargeting outside of Google Ads, and control your brand traffic. What I mean with that is run supporting campaigns. You don't just want to rely on one Performance Max campaign, but run supporting campaigns like brand search campaigns, so exclude your brand, have a generic search campaign with your best performing keywords. You can think about running dynamic search ads, and you might also think about having upper funnel campaigns like video, demand gen, or display campaigns to really control how much you are spending in the upper funnel and try to make your Performance Max campaign focus more on the lower funnel. Then segmenting your campaigns can be very effective. When you scale a Performance Max campaign, you don't want to scale just one big Performance Max campaign, but most of the time it makes sense to segment the one campaign out into several campaigns. And that's especially helpful with e-commerce accounts. Common examples are segmenting by product performance. So you might have one campaign with your best performing products getting the most budget and the other products go into other separate campaigns. Or you might make a segmentation by margin. So you have a campaign with your high margin products where you can go in with a lower T ROAS because you can still make a profit with that. So you can go in and bid more aggressively, and in another campaign you have your lower margin products where you have to be a little bit more conservative. And why is that helpful? Because it gives you more control and more data, which makes it easier to scale. Then what you always want to do is check your website quality and content, because Performance Max campaigns make use of your website, so your website contents, for auto-generated assets, or they choose the right URLs with the URL expansion. So make sure your website is of high quality, it's fast, because you can't scale a campaign where the landing page doesn't convert. Then you might want to look into retargeting outside of Google Ads. Of course, Performance Max retargets on its own, but think about what is happening in the other channels. For example, what is happening on Meta, so Facebook and Instagram, you can retarget there, and what is happening on email. So really think about what is happening after someone clicks on your ad, because increasing the whole value after the click will make scaling far more effective. And then last but not least, always control your brand traffic. I would always recommend excluding the brand from your Performance Max campaign, have separate brand campaigns running, because if you're not doing that, it makes your results look better than they actually are in the Performance Max campaign. So you see, scaling your campaigns isn't just about increasing the budget. It's always about doing it smart. Make smaller changes, wait and observe, and optimize continuously. Think about adding additional campaigns and have in mind that it is not unusual that the performance drops when scaling. Please leave a like if you found this video helpful, and let me know in the comments if you have any questions about it. Of course, subscribe to my channel if you want more free and helpful videos like this one. See you in my next video. Until then, work smart with clicks in mind.